to the Discourse for today, Friday the 13th, October 13th, Friday, October 13th, 2023, the triple whammy of the spook zone. Hi, I'm your host, Tristan. Welcome to the Discourse. I am Tristan, the host of Step Back, which is a YouTube channel you're probably watching this on right now, which you can find at stepbackhistory.com or at nebula.tv/stepback. Or I am the co-host of the podcast It's Probably Not Aliens, which you can find at probsnotaliens.com, which I've been feeling very hard this week because I have almost had to dedicate my entire week to Probs Not Aliens work. I stream on Fridays at noon, like you're watching right now, and if you want to support this show and the work that I do, you can go to places like nebula.tv/stepback. If you sign up for Nebula using that link, you support my work directly. And of course, if you watch my stuff on Nebula, you're contributing to supporting the Tristan way more than your typical YouTube situation. If you want to do some direct support, you can do patreon.com/stepbackhistory. You get all videos early and ad-free, just like on Nebula. You can get your name in the credits and such. I think I'm gonna have to talk about this in the future, but I'm gonna have to retire the voting on subjects thing, just because essentially I'm moving into a paradigm where I'm gonna have to choose the topics of my videos more to hop onto the news of any given day. I might try to see if I can fit a user poll into that, but I need to kind of have a faster turnaround time between news events and videos. That'll be starting in 2024. And of course, super chats are always welcome and appreciated, but they are not necessary, obviously, because I like to keep my content free for anybody, because I know what it's like to not have money, as somebody who right now doesn't have money. My latest video is on the topic of propaganda. I feel like I know it sounds kind of selfish, but in our given current unfolding geopolitical events, I have to say my current video on how the political elites and the wealthy promote capitalism and American dominance through the massaging of the ways that we get and interpret information, pretty fucking apropos to our current moment. So yeah, please check out that video. It came out about 2 weeks ago. My next video, which should be coming out on November 3rd, that's the current release date I have on books, that's going to be about the JFK assassination. So that'll be hitting stores in the next, that'll be hitting stores on November 3rd. The video is half JFK, like the history of the JFK assassination and what happened and all the sort of impact and fallout of it, and mostly debunking the JFK assassination conspiracy theories. The current ongoing title I have for it right now is "Why You're Wrong About the JFK Assassination." So we'll see where that goes. At the moment, I have a right at the moment, the thumbnail is in the hands of the amazing Hot Cider, who is currently on vacation. So once he gets back and he starts making thumbnails, I'll have some pretty cool stuff to show you. Yeah. And I'm just going to also talk a lot about in that video about my kind of frustration with the online left being my fellow friends in the online left falling for the cheap intellectual position of being needlessly contrarian and conspiratorial, and starting an investigation with a preconceived idea of there being a conspiracy rather than following the evidence where it leads. That's going to be the sort of, it's good to be skeptical of the government. The government makes up shit all the time. They lie, they steal, they do crimes. And most of the time when they do lie or they fabricate or do things, it's because they have a very specific goal in mind or because they're trying to cover their ass. And I also think that leftists need to stop doing some stuff because I think that treating these government organizations as if they are big monolithic, beings of infinite power, instead of organizations made up of people that are flawed and also are fallible and can be defeated, are it's important. So we'll see where that goes. I'm very excited because I feel like there's a high chance of spiciness, because I think that the JFK conspiracy theory is one that is very mainstream. Like I'm kind of like going tongue in cheek on this, but I'm like taking the position. I'm treating the video like I'm elaborating this conspiracy theory that goes against the mainstream narrative, and my conspiracy is that Lee Harvey Oswald shot JFK. So we'll see, and was the only person to do so. Especially because they just I don't know if you guys saw this, but and the thing is, conspiracy circles don't pay attention to this kind of stuff, so they're ignoring it. But there's this book that came out by one of the Secret Service agents who was taking care of JFK during the assassination, and turned out 1960s forensic investigations weren't the best, and he basically moved the bullet that shot. He moved one of the bullets, and the fact that he moved the bullet and he picked it up and put it down somewhere else is apparently the impetus behind the entire magic bullet theory. And so this little bit of evidence really breaks all of the magic bullet insanity, and also just a bunch of other things. The thing is, there were two options to go down. There would be the intense little route where you talk about every little bit and piece, which would take forever. You could basically make an entire YouTube channel out of that, because the JFK conspiracy movement its lore and world building has grown so big that it's virtually impossible to really tell its story straight, or to address all of the things. So I'm going to try and do some broad stroke stuff hey, conspiracies are notoriously hard to keep under wraps. And the fact that 60 years have passed next month and there's been no leaks, there's been no, there's not been any whistleblowers, there's not been, and after the changing of several presidents, there's been let me see, let me try to do this. LBJ, Nixon, freaking Carter, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and now Biden. And out of all of those different governments and changeovers of things, that the JFK, finding out that the JFK was a secret operation by a bunch of people who might be your political enemies, never came to the surface. I don't know. It seems fucking bullshit. And also just the fact that I have a much more logical reason for why the government's being so cagey about why they did that, why they're not releasing all of this information about the investigation, which is one, revealing the fact that the investigation was done kind of sloppily. They had a lot of disagreements between local police and the FBI, which led to a lot of stuff being botched pretty badly, especially by the local police too. A lot of the more intense parts of the investigation, basically looking into, one of the main things that they were interested in trying to find an answer to was, was this connected to the communists somehow? Which meant that they had to investigate Lee Harvey Oswald's time in Cuba and the USSR, which meant that they had needed to tap intelligence resources, intelligence assets, spies, that American spies in both Cuba and the USSR, which would have involved, if they made that public today, smart people in those governments could use that to probably expose, through connections and rings and stuff like that, modern day American spies in those countries. And third, the other big part of the redacted report would be a big and detailed how-to manual for circumventing the Secret Service's security to be able to get into a position so that one guy with one guy with a rifle could kill the president of the United States. Not something exactly that they want to be publishing in huge numbers. That's why like a lot of the 9/11, like the 9/11 Commission report was so interesting, because that is like a thing they would have redacted in the past, because it was just like a detailed account of all of the security failings that led to the 9/11 attacks happening. So yeah, it's going to be a thing. But I also know that people really want it to, because if the only motivation you have is America bad, badness, bad, then you are just going to try and find the answer that makes America look like the most insidious and evil of all of these things, instead of following the evidence where it leads. And also, like, there's a lot of other stuff, like reliance on eyewitness testimony that is notoriously bad. Reliance on the memories, the fallible memories of people who were witnesses, who were in a high-stress, chaotic situation, which we already know is bad for forming good memories. And two is oftentimes recollected decades later, which leads for many, many times to change the way that you remember things. Sorry if I'm talking about this a lot. I spent last night, since I basically work all waking hours of my life right now, I basically spent a good chunk of last night trying to prepare the like idea for the video, developing like the target audience and title and thumbnail design and like the sort of way that I'm going to pitch it and all that kind of stuff. Like I spent like 3 hours in basically a meeting with myself trying to figure out how I was going to do all of this. And I think it worked out pretty well. I'm pretty excited about the sort of angle I'm going down and the sort of audience that I'm trying to hit. Yeah. So that's my next video. Obviously you can see I just sort of got into it hardcore like yesterday. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm pretty pumped for it. I've been wanting to make this video for years. And I was just coming out of another like less creative thing. Like the beginning of a video is the most creative part of the process, and the least creative part of a process is like the least creative part of a different process is what I was doing yesterday, or most of this week, which was editing podcasts. I had to edit and research like 3 podcasts in the last like week. Almost 4 actually. I started research on a 4th. So yeah, shit's crazy over at Shay Tristan. Yeah. If you want to submit questions for this or future streams, I'm going to put a link in the chat, but you can always go to this link here, stepbackhistory.com/stream question. Please do so, because I have no questions at the moment. It's empty. So I'm going to have to ad lib right now. And I have things that I'm very nervous about talking about for a long period of time. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, questions are always welcome. And of course, if this is your first time watching the stream, congratulations. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. It's really awesome that you're joining us. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you have a good time. Please make yourself known in the chat, though, because we have a really great chat community of people who are kind and cool and amazing. So, oh, Gad Uriev's here. Sweet. That's fun. Oh, boy. Getting a bit of dry mouth over the stuff I'm going to say today. Oh, boy. The FLAC, the filter, the manufacturing consent filter of FLAC is strong this week. Yeah. But before we get into things, I know this is going to be a tough one to do, but we got to post our wins. I think the worst weeks are the weeks where we have to post our wins the most. So post your wins, everybody. Let's win, please. I'll get started. So anyone who doesn't know what this is, because this channel and this stream, and you can see in the corner here, the sort of ethos I'm going for. This stream is very, can get into some very dark subjects, and I am a staunch anti-doomer. And so I do my part for anti-doomer action by trying to talk about our victories, big and small, this week. Sometimes the biggest celebration is the fact that you were able to get up in the morning, have breakfast, and take a shower. Sometimes your victory is that you have been, you got into university and things are doing great. I want all of them, big and small, because we know that to different people, different victories mean different things. So we just want to celebrate each other winning. To kind of get started, I'll talk about mine, which is the big one. As anybody who follows the podcast knows, our podcast release schedule has been a little wonky, especially in like the last 6 months or so. And that has been that's not a thing I like doing. You know me, I really hate missing a deadline. So we put together our heads and we basically reconfigured the entire workflow for how an episode of It's Probably Not Aliens gets made. Including several dead man switches and things like that, where I am essentially we basically made it a way so that we will always have an episode out and there will always be an early episode for those on Nebula. That is the thing that I'm going to hit religiously. And in order to do that, we had to put in some new systems, but also it meant getting caught up in a way. So I spent the last week deep in editing mode. I edited so much fucking audio, it's insane. I am almost sick of my own voice, as somebody who normally doesn't have an issue listening to my own voice because I do this for a fucking living. And I was basically working from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day for the last week. And now it's done. It's done. I am caught up. We're at the point where we only need to record, or we only need to edit one episode a week, and I only need to research one episode a week. So we are back on track. And luckily we're recording a few low research episodes over the next few weeks, so I also have some time to get caught up on that front. So the feeling is when you get out of a real deep hole of work, it feels really good, and that's me right now. Yeah. What else can I say of wins? My son is getting very fun. He learned oh yeah, we had a fucking adorable moment last night at dinner. So, one of the things that my wife and I do is that at dinner time, we have 1 cup of diet root beer that we, just our dessert kind of thing. And, to do that, I buy 2 liter bottles of the A&W Diet Root Beer. And we finished a bottle, so I just had it on the table while we were eating dinner, and my son was playing with it. And one of the things that he's starting to learn is ready, set, go. So when you go ready, set, and then he goes, go! And it's very, very cute and really awesome. But it's turned, we had a whole little session where we were, rolling the bottle back and forth to him and to between my wife and I together, going ready, set, and then when he goes go, we roll it across the table. And it was just we did that for 10 minutes, and it was the cutest thing in the universe. Yeah. So I'm pretty, that was pretty awesome. All right. I'm just going to read the chat real quick. I've just been motoring for the last few minutes, and I just want to get take it. Choose to interpret that to mean there's a really good IPNA episode in the future. There's a few great episodes coming up in the future. We have 3 back-to-back guests. We had an episode with Mia Mulder that came out last week. We have an episode with Trey the Explainer that came out this week. And next week we have a episode with Rod Kim, the person who wrote the theme song for It's Probably Not Aliens. And yeah, so that's pretty exciting. And then the next week after that, I think we're doing a episode where we celebrate It's Probably Not Aliens' 2nd birthday. All right. Which fellow leftists are these? Not to cause drama, but I'm not sure I've witnessed what you're talking about. With some examples may help. I think you're talking about contrarianism and conspiratorialism. And these aren't even people I dislike even, but the Chapo people have a habit of falling into this. TrueAnon as a podcast tends to fall into this. There's trying to think of a few more. There's another journalist by the name of Rob Russo, who's a bit of a Maoist who kind of falls into these circles. And of course, there's just also the weird, the weird left. I don't know what you would call it. The left that like Sophie from Mars made that whole video about a year or two ago that also fit into this. And the people who just have no issue going on Russia Today all the time tend to fall into these categories. There's an issue of conspiratorialism on the left that is, I think, from a position of coming from a position of there being legitimately a long history of the state trying to intervene in leftist movements, and even further, like just a lack of critical thinking skills because all of us are grossly misinformed by our education systems, even people who have leftist politics. Favorite theory is the Secret Service got spooked and stray rounded JFK. See, like that could like. If I don't believe in any of the like JFK conspiracy theories, none of them, because none of them make any sense. The only one that like ever became close to convincing me was that was a bit of like an one that I feel like wouldn't be too crazy, but also like fit a lot of the things that I still am like, I haven't like picked apart super hardcore. But the big one is that like, but it doesn't go into the things like, 'cause like everyone is like, oh, the CIA did it for reasons. Because nearly ending the world wasn't hardcore Cold Warrior enough, I guess. But the one that comes to mind all the time is, for me, is that JFK, one of the things that JFK did that like really went under the radar as far as his legacy goes, is that he was one of the presidents that like took seriously and tried to crack down on the mafia. And like the idea that like it was like a mob hit, was like briefly compelling, although I don't think that's true anymore. Just because, not because like I don't think the mob could do it or that they're like too good at people to do it or anything like that. I just think that the case for Lee Harvey Oswald doing it just makes too much sense to me anyway. Greetings from chilly but budding rural metropolis of Owen Sound, located snugly in the northern half of Southwestern Ontario. Yeah, Parry Sound, which I don't think is very far away from Owen Sound, is where my uncle used to have a cottage, and I used to go there in the summers. So yeah, you're from cottage country, as far as I can remember. Riding high on creativity at the moment. Nice. Can people do PhDs in JFK conspiracy movement at this point? Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody already has. So have a conspiracy baiting framework that could potentially, when anyone mentions World Trade Center, IMF, and Council on Foreign Relations, etc., etc. In X-Men movies, Magneto tried to save JFK by changing bullet trajectory because he was a mutant. Oh man, that's funny. Not a big fan of American diabolism. It literally leads to people to not be skeptical but uncritically thinking ideologues. Yeah, I am also like anti-American diabolism. America like is not like America doesn't. I feel like it's reductive because like America doesn't do the things that it does because it's evil. It does that like if to take things like to think of things through that lens is not going to be very useful to you. I know that it kind of comes from like the activist lens, like because the U.S. is usually on the wrong side of basically every issue ever. But I think, and this isn't me trying to say America is actually good. In fact, I would say that it's a better option to, when looking at a institution like the U.S., is to think of it less as being good or evil and more just being an institution. And that means that it is interested in advancing its own interests, its economic prowess, and its power over others at home and abroad, which means that it acts purely on self-interest. Whether or not, like, if it's, you know, for good reasons, then they'll do it. If it's for bad reasons, they will equally do it. Because the main problem with like an institution that is as big as the U.S. government is that it has too many people to really have any real direction. It just sort of goes by its own logic. And that logic is environmentally destructive. It is imperialistic, and it is oppressive to its own people. Because at the end of the day, all states, if they had their way on every single issue, would be imperialistic, oppressive, and cruel, because states are, as institutions, want to grow more powerful and proliferate. They're all playing paradox games, basically. And so they will always do with whatever power they have at hand to advance their own position. That's just the nature of being a state. And the US just happens to be the most powerful state, with a military that is grotesquely overfunded and can just get into whatever it wants. It's sort of the nature of institutions as a function. This is why I have this idea of making a video about why I'm an anarchist at some point, and this is like part of the answer. Is like, I don't think, like, once groups of people get large enough, they stop operating on the logic of the people who work in it and start kind of operating on a logic of their own, which is usually self-perpetuation and growth at the cost of everything else. Let's see. I know, Gad, you're probably in the thick of it right now. I can imagine, with how frustrating everything that's going on in Palestine is right now, I can imagine that as a leftist Israeli citizen, I imagine you are beside yourself with the way that things are going right now. I know that we'll probably have to go into like a deep dive talk about that, because it's the only thing on everybody's minds, because it's like a humongous, horrific crime against humanity happening right now. But I want to work myself into it, because, yeah, I want us to enjoy our time together. Okay. The fact that Pim here is a big win. They had 4-hour travel for a meeting for like an hour today. Oh man, I hate that bullshit. When I lived in Toronto and I was a grad student at Western, I had to for 1 hour meetings. Like, there's one time where, because I had a job as a research assistant, I had to unlock a cabinet. To unlock that cabinet, I had to do a 2-day trip with 4 hours on the bus to get to London, to go to campus, to meet with this guy, to open a cabinet, give him the thing that he was looking for, close it. And then I had to ask one of my friends to stay over at their place and then go home the next day. It was utter bullshit. I hate this kind of stuff. Sundar Sarangan. My win is that I successfully managed to submit all my paperwork for my U.S. work visa, and it was accepted. Sweet! As somebody who is married to a immigrant who moved here, I know that immigration systems can be a giant pain in the ass. So congratulations on getting through that. Victor learned how to pill and give liquid medicine to your cat. Oof, that's tough. That's an intense thing. Summon Demon. My elderly cat got sick, but luckily he recovered. That is so good. Oh man. When cats get sick, I've had so many cats now that when a cat gets sick and they're over the age of 10, I'm like, here it is. This is it. Socialism and Revolution. My win is recovering fairly well from having 2 wisdom teeth removed. Nice. Well done. I had a very easy time with my wisdom teeth, but I have heard horror stories of people who had some pretty tough times getting their wisdom teeth removed. Pim got food poisoning last weekend, but they managed to mitigate the worst effects and not let it go to your head. Excellent. That's awesome. Started buying PC parts and got an SK Hinks Platinum P41 SSD and MSI with a motherboard and a really good deal. That is awesome. Yeah, I need to upgrade my computers. My computer is decent. I bought a pretty good $1,700 desktop computer in 2018, at the end of 2018. So the computer is good and it runs like most things, but it's definitely in need of an upgrade. And the biggest thing that it's in need of an upgrade in is in its hard drives, because it still has non SSD hard drives, and almost all of them are full. I also need a faster USB port, because I have not enough USB ports on this tower, and I have things I don't know if you can see this. This is one of my external hard drives. I have 2 because I'm kind of between hard drives at the moment. And they can sometimes be very slow, especially when you're editing off of them. Finished writing a song that's been brewing for a few weeks on Wednesday. Uploaded the demo to your YouTube channel before joining the stream. That's so cool. I feel like the conspiracy also has an American exceptionalism bent to the left with the idea of a road not taken. Yeah. I think calling them a weird left is making them out to be much cooler than they are. Yeah. Don't really follow any of the people mentioned. Explain why I couldn't make it. What are you paid to regurgitate the same copy pasta garbage about China as every other grifter? Oh, nothing. I don't know what you are. I don't know what you are specifically referring to. I have said a lot of things about China. I don't know exactly. Or are you, since you're calling me a grifter, are you just mad about something? Are you mad because I refuse to call China like the evil empire that is evil and is bad because they're evil and bad? Or like what? Like just because I refuse to just spout like American propaganda about China? Like I have said many things about China that are not good. I don't understand. I don't know what you want. I don't know what propagandists want. Like the China people, or you're on the other side, which is like that China is good and they're good because they're good and goodliness. Xi Jinping kisses fairies and he loves kittens and hugs bunnies every chance he can. Like China is a country. China is a country. It has a stated ideology. It has a, like all major institutions, a focus on advancing its own interests at any cost. Sometimes that's in like, like we're going to be the biggest investor in green energy because China, due to the fact that they're not really a democracy, can actually like think further than one election in the future. So they like understand that like their long-term existence is dependent on like, like green energy and stuff like that. But then also it's like, hey, we don't like we're having issues with a rowdy population on the fringes of our empire. Better fucking put them in re-education camps or whatever. Fucking shit, man. China's a big country. Does a lot of things. Owen Sound is on the other side of Georgian Bay than Perry Sound. Ah, okay. Metrus. Okay, I'm sorry. Your name is just far too Polish for me to be able to pronounce correctly. I apologize. Matus Araskovic. I'll go with that. 2 wins. You finished most of the drawings in your video and finished a book about the Great Lechia, a conspiracy of Polish nationalists that Poles descended from the ancient Lechite people. Interesting. I'm curious about that. That's curious to me. I haven't heard about that one. That's awesome. Finishing projects is like one of the best feelings ever. I love it so much. All right. Let's see. Hey, Nicholas officially got licensed as an RN. That is so cool. Nicholas, you are the fucking goat. I feel like, I know this is like in the age of TikTok nurses, like not like popular to say, but like there are a few people on this earth who are as intensely giving and like as underappreciated and overworked as nurses. Like nurses are the reason so many people don't die. They are so resourceful and so clever, and they are so supportive and do so much work. Like it is like anybody who knows a nurse knows that they work absolutely insane hours, but they get like no recognition, mostly because it's a pink collar job, which means that it's predominantly done by women, which means that their work is very often undervalued. Yeah, the fact that you are, despite that fact, like signing up to become a registered nurse is a fucking amazing thing. So go with the gods, Nicholas. You are blessed. Zia, finally got your government-backed paperwork completed and mailed back with just another month before the deadline. Take that, executive dysfunction. Yeah, fuck you, executive dysfunction. My little old lady cat is doing well at 19 years old. Well done. Yeah. Say China equals Darth Vader, otherwise I'm unsubbing right now. Yeah. I interestingly see China kind of similar to how you were describing America earlier, focus on advancing its own interests. That is because that is true of all countries. That is the point of countries. Governments exist to basically grow and become more powerful with whatever tools they have at hand. That is like at their core what they do. States never give up power. They never devolve their authority. They never hand over resources to people and not themselves, unless it is some sort of like advancing of their own interests in different ways. There's really like institutions that big just can't afford not to do that. So yeah. Wow, you're punishing yourself. Amazing. Awesome. Cool. Tarbox, what did you miss? We're just going through the chat and doing some wins. If you have some wins, Tarbox, I know that you are a regular contributor of wins. So you gotta take your car for new tires. For a second, I thought you said you had to take your cat for new tires, and I was like, oh, that'd be pretty good. Yeah, I guess that is another win. ? Is that I am getting a car in like 2 weeks. It hasn't really like grokked on me yet that I'm like going to own an entire ass car. That's never a thing I've done before. So I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know. I've never had a car. I've never like had both. I've never had a car. I've only rarely had the license to, I've never had a license to drive a car that I could like go when like I didn't have like a parent in the car with me or something. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. There's so many things you could do. Still pushing through Indeed hell as my division is crumbling. Nice. Is Indeed how like you're Indeed like a job search? Well, keep at it. As somebody who was in that world a few years ago, I know it's tough. Hopefully you got a Subaru. I'm not buying a car. I have a friend who is moving to Australia and he is giving me his car. That is the only way that I'm actually getting a car. It's in like, I feel like I'm doing something even better than what buying an electric car would not be like a new electric car would not be as good as what I'm doing, because what I'm getting is a car that is over 20 years old, but only has like 80,000 kilometers on it. So it is and it's very, very gas efficient. And I feel like I don't feel very guilty about my impact on the planet by having a car that has very little kilometers on it, using it only when I need to, and driving a car that is over 20 years old that has like very good gas efficiency. There's no air conditioning. There's no bells and whistles at all. So it is a car. It's a car in its retirement, and I am going to use it to go grocery shopping and go to my parents who live in Burlington. Like that is like the extent of the things that I taking my kid to like Storybook Garden or something like that. Like if like the hard rules are going to be still, if you can do it by walking, we do it by walking. And so very much it's going to be just for situations that we otherwise would not be able to do. Because London has a terrible public transit system, our buses are chaotic and insane and don't work. And our streets are not very pedestrian friendly. So I'm not going to be the kind of person who gets in a car to drive 1 block to get a snack, but I am going to be a person who, yeah. But I we'll see what happens. Like, I mean, I've never owned a car, so I know that it opens up possibilities that I'll think, like, I plan on using it to go to the farmer's market and to go, like, to Costco and stuff like that. But I kind of I don't know for sure. I think it's a Toyota. I don't know for sure, but I'm like 40% sure it's a Toyota. You need to slap the London, Ontario City Council to fix their car-centric bullshit. It's true. It is bullshit. Unfortunately, yeah, it's London is a city that is entirely governed by its suburbs, because at this point its downtown core is so small that the city is almost entirely suburb, which means that they basically dictate policy. American brain melting at the use of kilometers and gas efficiency instead of mileage. Oh, forgot about that. Yeah. I couldn't tell you what a mile is to save my life. Every time someone explains it to me, I don't know. I could not tell you what a mile is. I can kind of tell you what a yard is, because a yard is roughly a meter. And for some reason in Canada, we still measure our height in feet. So I can tell you roughly what a foot is, but like, I couldn't tell you what a mile is. I couldn't tell you what an inch is, really. I couldn't tell you what, like, I don't use any other option, other things. Yeah. Suburbs are hell. They are hell. I don't live in a suburb. I don't think. I wouldn't define the place I live as a suburb, but I don't exactly know what I would define my neighborhood as, because I live in like, maybe there's people who actually know urban planning who would know the kind of neighborhood I live in. I live in like a close to downtown neighborhood that still has houses. It's not like out in the boonies. It's still like it's walkable to downtown. It's just a place that has, and also the place I live is like a mix of single family houses and like multi-unit rentals and like split levels and stuff like that. And it's mostly a historic district too. Like the reason why it hasn't just been bulldozed and turned into a bunch of stuff is because a lot of the houses are like 100+ years old. So it's also like harder to get rid of that stuff. Semi-mixed zoning sounds like a periphery. Sure. It's not so bad. I like the kind of like setup. So if periphery is the term, then that's probably what I live in, and I'm okay. I can live with that. Like I live in like a street with like a bunch of like mixed unit, like multi-unit houses, but they're like, you know, those like, 2 or 3 story, maybe like, 6 to 12 unit type slabs instead of like an apartment building, but like, like one of those like slabs. We live near those, and there's a lot of like old big Victorian mansions that have been cut up into a bunch of units that are in the area too. So but like you also don't have to walk to go downtown, or you don't have to drive to go downtown. You can walk downtown, and it mostly because I think like there's a river involved. Yeah. That's just, that's how I do. I once was in a conversation with Jason Slaughter, and I mentioned the neighborhood I lived in, and he said it's basically the least it's one of the less terrible parts of, it's one of the most walkable parts of an unwalkable city, is I think the way that he described it. So, does anybody have, do we have any more wins? I just want to make sure I don't lose any wins before we start talking about stuff. So let me know if you have any wins that you wish to share with the class before we talk about whatever it is that people are going to ask. Also, I should ask because I don't have enough money to buy it because it's $40. But has anyone tried out the Star Trek Infinite game? Is it good? Tell me it's good. I haven't had a turn to play it yet because of me suffering from no money-itis. So, but is it good? Little win is you got a nice mask for COVID, though it's a bit scary looking, and therefore I didn't use it yet. Oh, well. See, like... I feel like I'm going to go against... what's it called? I am in the... Because the COVID mitigation efforts right now, I'm like... The second that, like, you know, we are... Okay. I should try to think about how to talk about this because I'm definitely not doing what I should be. So I still carry a mask with me at all times. But I very rarely wear it anymore. Just because like it's, the critical mass of people wearing it is just not a thing. And so I'm just like, whatever. It's not a good way to think, and I like denounce and recuse myself immediately for saying that. That should not be an example of a thing of people do, especially as we're going into winter. I might start wearing it again in winter if like cases really start getting bad, but at the moment I'm just like, I've already had it. I've been vaccinated, which is, I know, a bad line of thinking. I'll be getting it again. I'll be getting vaccinated again like in just a few weeks, and so it's like, well. From what I saw, the new Star Trek game is basically a very comprehensive Stellaris mod. Nice if you are into that kind of stuff, but I'm mostly indifferent to it. Okay. So, good. I at some point I'll buy it. That's at some point when I am making positive money, I will buy it. And I should also say, don't be like me. I am being reckless. And, yeah. You wear one on GO trains and public transit. That's good. I probably should do that. I haven't been on GO trains in a while. But that's because, like, the GO train here is shite. Did a video about how most leftists not wearing masks does not match up with how most of us do take dismantling ableism seriously. It's, yeah. I mean, yeah. There's no way to talk my way out of that. Yeah. It's not great. I probably shouldn't have said anything. All right, I do have a couple questions now. All right. Do you happen to know any disability-focused anarchists, like podcasters or YouTubers or something like that? No, oddly, I don't. I know that there are podcasters and YouTubers who have disabilities, and they have to like is part of part of the reason that I edit Positive Leftist News is to help out Mexi, who has like some disabilities and stuff. But but I don't know anybody who it's like the main thrust of the stuff they talk about. Wait, there's one, isn't there? There's somebody there's somebody who I know who talks a lot about specifically like the autism spectrum. Which is like, it's called Ponderful? Yeah, Ponderful, which is about like autism spectrum stuff. That's the only one that I know that like immediately jumps out to me. That nice British girl, don't really know too much, but I just know that she's out there. I've seen her around, and I've seen the thumbnails and titles and stuff. So I don't really watch a lot of YouTube these days, guys. I got too much, like, you guys, like, when I say that I am like working virtually every hour that I am awake, I'm not lying. I haven't had time to like I haven't played Baldur's Gate in like a month. I haven't like watched a TV show really, if I wasn't like, like otherwise unable to do anything else because of like, like taking care of baby or like, working in some other capacity. But like I have been making videos and podcasts like almost nonstop for like almost a month. So YouTube isn't very disability friendly, is it? No, not really. It requires you constantly pump out content to be successful. I will say it's also not super friendly to people who like to think about the things they say before they say it, because everybody who I know who takes weeks and weeks and works really hard on their content to make sure that it's educational and well-reasoned and nuanced, get their lunch eaten by like a guy who just spouts nonsense based on like the first idea he has that pops into his head on a stream that's like 4 hours long. So like it is, yeah. It's not the best platform. It's just the only one. Anyways, I did have a question somewhere. Speaking of forensics, back in the 1960s, what's our opinion of forensics today? I'm kind of under the impression that movies and cop shows train the public to think the forensic scientists are logic wizards and can't be wrong, but in reality they are, sometimes wrong. So that is some good questions. So yeah, the 1960s forensics was shit. Usually most crimes were just solved by grabbing the closest person of color to the crime that happened and putting them in prison. That hasn't changed a whole lot today, but forensics, I mean, it has gotten very sophisticated as like new biotechnology and stuff like that has made it much more sophisticated. But you are right. There's this false notion that it is much more like sound than it actually is. And this has been a problem because there's a, like because of the way that like cop shows and forensic shows have like portrayed forensic evidence, forensics in like courtrooms are given way more weight than they actually deserve. and can be a problem. Like there's a lot of things that people think are like very like hardcore and like very solid that aren't. Like DNA evidence. DNA degrades very fast, and while like it's getting a lot better, it still can be very messy in various different ways. Another one that's like kind of infamous at this point is that like lie detector technology is just complete bullshit. There's no like lie detector technology does not work. It is it has never worked. It is complete bullshittery. But also things like fingerprints. Fingerprints aren't as unique as people think they are. They are pretty unique, but there have been many cases in which a fingerprint has led to a wrong conviction, or there have been several times in which like a fingerprint needs to be very detailed in order to be really accurate, and so it is in any way like a partial fingerprint or a smeared fingerprint can lead people to be very, very unsure about the identity of the people. The other major problem with fingerprints is that one of the major databases of fingerprints is done of basically everybody who has ever been arrested or has been in prison, which means that groups that have been wrongfully criminalized will more often show up on APHIS and end up being become suspects in active criminal investigations, even if they had nothing to do with it, which plays into the over-policing and the sort of discriminatory, like, because the people who get arrested for crimes and who do time in prison are overwhelmingly people of color, people who are poor, and just like various like marginalized groups. And so the fact is that like the biggest database of fingerprints are people who have been in the criminal system in some way or another. Just adds to that. So, yeah. So there's that. So like, but I would say like forensics has come a very, very long way, especially genetic forensics has come a very, very long way in like, you know, the 20 years since like CSI like said it was ironclad, and now it's like a lot better than it used to be, but it's still not perfect. And I still like kind of stand by it because yes, forensics being overemphasized for its power has led to a lot of wrongful convictions, but I will also say that forensic evidence has also been used by like the Innocence Project to get a lot of people wrongfully convicted out of prison. So it's not all evil, you know. There is and a lot of the issues with forensic evidence come from like bad collection of samples or just not processing samples or things like that, because because it costs money to do that. So if they like infamously tons and tons of rape kits are never processed to find the DNA of like to find DNA or anything like that. And if they're pretty sure that they have a lead on who did it, they tend to not, you know, spend the money to process DNA and all that kind of stuff, which can sometimes, you know, lead to false convictions and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a fairly common, but like the Innocence Project has successfully used DNA evidence to get people out of prison for crimes they didn't commit and all that kind of stuff. So it is like very like powerful, and it's getting stronger. How can a layman trust them any more than before? Can't. Never trust anybody. Never trust anybody with power. That's like a pretty standard thing to think of. It doesn't mean that like this is like maybe part of like the whole like contrarianism thing that I should probably talk about. Just because you don't trust somebody does not mean everything they say is false. It usually means that you need to be skeptical of everything they say. But like, you know, there's like, but knowing that, like, into my mind, like trusting somebody, trust is very rare for me. But like knowing, knowing that the state and like different people have their own interests, and knowing where those interests are aligned with the current thing that they're saying, and being skeptical is very important. Yeah, the other part that people have talked about too is that a lot of the other ways that people collected evidence for crimes before forensic evidence was like interviews with people, which we interrogations, which we've already seen have like way bigger problem. Like they cause way more problems and lead to way more false stories than like DNA and like fingerprints and stuff like that. So the fact that like it's not perfect, but it's also replacing even less perfect ways of doing things is, yeah. This makes me kind of like wish that I have like a handful of like TV shows that I've always been sitting on to pitch. Like I'm currently sort of subtly thinking about writing a spec script for a pilot for a sitcom. Just for fun. I don't actually plan on like actually like shopping it around unless it like ends up being really good, which I doubt because it's like the first script I've ever written, but it's just like a thing I'm doing for fun and like learning the format of writing for television. And the other one I've always wanted to pitch at some point is CSI. But like I wanted to actually like the title was going to be CSI Las Vegas, and the whole idea was that anyone who watched CSI when they were younger, like I did, is like CSI is basically like a science fiction show where they use forensic evidence that doesn't exist and like all sorts of insane stuff. But I always thought that like an interesting CSI show would be if it was like the sort of forensics department of the Las Vegas thing when Grisham, the main character of the main show, started like his like first day, and it would be all about like the sort of way they did forensics like in the 1970s or something, where it would be about like blood typing and like kind of the more analog type stuff. And I thought that might make for a more interesting procedural, but also police procedurals are bad and we should probably stop making them anyway. So there's that too. So there is that. But I like more. I like more my idea about... I like my other idea. Medieval land. I have this... sorry. I've been marinating this idea for this sitcom for years. That is based on like a over 10-year-old bad lip reading video I saw. That I then just like spun out into like an entire idea on its own. And yeah. I feel like somebody talking about a script that they're working on is one of the least interesting things that a person can bring up next to like describing their dreams or their D&D characters. So maybe I'll stop. Okay. So let's see. Miss Josh, have I talked about the Manitoba election? No, that happened like this week, didn't it? I don't know too much detail. I just know that the NDP pulled out a surprise victory, which is pretty amazing. Or not a surprise victory, but like, you know, like the NDP won, and that's good. Because like Manitoba is one of those provinces that is like, I don't know. I think it's pretty close to majority Indigenous at this point. Let me check. So yes, about 57% of people in Manitoba live on reserves. So yeah, it's like, so it's a pretty heavy Indigenous province. He's the first Indigenous premier of the province. That's so awesome. That's so awesome. I mean, what's her name? Nikki Ashton, who I feel like is the only like NDP politician that I feel I feel like strongly in support of. She's her riding is like a Winnipeg riding, so it seems like Manitoba's got some stuff going in its favor over there. Mostly because I think it's the only prairie province that hasn't gone fucking stupid over oil because they basically don't have any. Like, Alberta went fucking insane because oil, and Saskatchewan also went insane also because oil. So there is that. My family's from Saskatchewan, and like the last time I went there was for my grandmother's funeral in 2019, and like it was everyone was so fucking horny for the oil pipeline, despite the fact that like all of the economic activity that had been going through there was already gone, because like they built the pipeline, it went through town, they built a hotel to house all the workers working on it, and then the pipeline moved on, and when we went there, the hotel was empty. Like there was just nobody residing there. It was a completely empty hotel because they built up all this infrastructure to support some construction workers that then moved on. And now the pipeline, like all the other pipelines, are providing no work. Yeah, anyways. Good stuff. So, next question I got here. This is an interesting one. So, Shaymith, can you wax poetical about a potential roadmap from our current economic environment to a Star Trek future? I believe that a bloodless revolution is possible, transitioning from capitalism to social democracy through clever use of multi-stakeholder cooperatives. What do you think? That's very optimistic of you. I'm very much like... It's like... Again, another thing that I'm like, I don't even know if I want to talk about it because people would find it not very interesting. But this question is part of a science fiction short story that I am working on. What I will say is I don't think that... in more of a way, I don't think that this is the way to the Star Trek future that people think. Like, I don't believe in social democracy. I don't really believe in democratic socialism. I don't think it's going to work. If democratic socialism could work, like if you could actually bring about socialism by voting the right people into power, they would make it illegal. The second we come close to being able to elect socialists is the second that democracy will be banned. Or at least elections will be banned, because there is no way that socialism is ever going to come into power without the people who have power violently refusing to, like, violently fighting against its implementation. So, that is the main position that I would take. And like the main center struggle of like the conflict is just that the state is not really going to be the vessel that we use to get to our liberation. Which is why I'm more convinced that if we are going to transition to a better society and something of a better like economic environment, like something like a Star Trek future, it's going to come from active resistance to the order. Now there is actually a little bit of an upside to this, in the sense that the state, like my whole thing is that like the state needs to like if we need to, get the economy we want, we're going to have to create it outside of the state by doing like filling in the spaces where the state doesn't have power. Luckily, the state seems to be in growing disinterest in doing anything for anybody who doesn't make $10 million a year. So like, in many ways, I think that the long-term survival of humanity is going to depend on essentially communities filling in for the filling in the spaces that the state just refuses to do anymore. Mutual aid disaster relief as an example, or things like cooperatives that take care of like food insecurity or things like that. I think that is like the parallel structures are definitely like the thing that I think about. I've been talking about parallel structures for years. And I am very much like, that is more the thing that I think is going to come out of the future. And even then, I see that if something like that were to get too powerful or too coordinated, that the state would also start cracking down on it. I do think that at the end of the day, there's going to be a turning point where states are going to realize that that they are ceding their legitimacy to rule by basically withdrawing doing anything for anybody who isn't wealthy. And whether they realize that too late and their like, brutal like reaction to crack down and oppress the people that they are dominating over as they're like desperate for control, whether or not that is successful is a question, because it really depends upon how long they go just basically ignoring most people's problems while they, cut their taxes and stuff. When like what state we'll be in at that point and everything like that is really like up for grabs. That's sort of like, this is why I sort of like, I kind of buy into the fact that Star Trek's future only really happened because of World War III. Like, the reason why Star Trek is the way it is because like a huge chunk of humanity died in a nuclear war in the 2050s. Now, I feel like that I don't think that would go the way that we think it would. Like, I'm not a person who is like, I'm not a Posadist or an accelerationist or anything like that, because I think that nuclear war would not end with like the resetting of society. It would end with the end of humans. And so it's not really like a viable thing. But knowing like the sort of Marxist analysis of history, there is no point without revolution where the powerful cede their power to the masses. It's never happened before, and it probably will never happen. Power concentrated in the elites needs to be taken by force, because it will never actually be taken voluntarily. That's like my general vibe of it. If you want, though, I can talk about the thing that I am planning on doing. Like, I'm working on the idea is that the pitch is that it's going to be a Star Trek-like status quo, like a sort of utopian future, but it is a future where humanity has, as I argue, evolved past capitalism and the state. And it's not a pretty future. Like, it's not a utopia, but it is like much better than today. And it is one that looks very little like Star Trek. But I can go through it. I don't know if you guys would find it interesting, so I'm going to wait until the chat speaks up, because we could also talk about other things that people do find interesting instead. But yeah. Hello, Johnny Desu. The roadmap is discover how to replicate foods and stuff from air atoms. Here's the thing, is that if we discover that existed, the first thing that would happen is that the machines would be prohibitively expensive, and like to have it, you'd have to buy a subscription, and they would like copyright all the patterns for all of the food and things. So you would have to pay a licensing fee for every item that you make, and that it would be a crime to jailbreak that. An alternative to Star Trek. Yeah, I'm planning on like, the idea that I have for this is to just create like a cast, like a sort of situation that like a kind of like Star Trek type thing, but instead of it being like a show, kind of focusing on it being like a series of short stories. Like, I'm kind of thinking that I might write it. This is also pending that I like learn how to write well, and that this actually does well and people actually like it, and like all that kind of stuff. Because like I've never really written fiction before that like I actually like am proud of. So this is all contingent on everything being as successful as I could possibly imagine. But the idea would be to treat it kind of like the way that The Witcher is written, where it's like, a mix between novels and short stories based on like different things. I definitely think that like the most likely future to me, the most likely like dystopian future that people have talked about is like is almost definitely like Parable of the Sower. I feel like that's the most like, because the Parable of the Sower is a dystopia where the state just gave up on helping people. It doesn't do anything anymore. Everything has been privatized. The environment has collapsed. They're not doing anything to help anybody. And if you're not rich, you're basically just like scrounging around for the basics to live. And that is like, that is more likely. That is the more likely dystopian future, I think. But yeah, okay. Let me go through this thing. So there's been some interest in it. I'll talk about the general pitch, and we can kind of go through it from there. So here's the general pitch of the setting that I'm working on. It's a space opera. That space opera is a term for like the genre that like Star Trek is in, where it's like you're on a ship, there's a crew, you're going to different planets, you're meeting aliens, that kind of stuff. Takes place several centuries in the future with a diverse ship exploring space and meeting new people. The idea would be to alternate between novels of big events and short story collections in different scenarios with a certain crew and ship. The idea is that it's a post-state, post-capitalist humanity, that the world is run by a complex interconnection of federations, mutual aid networks, communes, unions, etc. The world is very full of diverse ways of living, and everyone learns from the successes and failures of endless experiments in governing with a supportive net to protect those that fail from dire consequences. Religion isn't gone, but it is greatly changed. So religion exists. It's still an important part. I have this whole idea of the ship having this like gyroscopic prayer room so that Muslim crew members can face Mecca. No matter where they are in the universe. The other idea is that gender has changed very drastically. It's no longer, a person does not choose their gender until they reach adulthood. And so like what happens is that parents give their children what's called a child name. And these are like very like, very child kind of cutesy names. And then as they reach adulthood, they build their own concept. And the sort of like coming of age ceremony is where you decide what your name is going to be and what gender, if any, that you wish to perform, and that people are fully free to modify themselves to fit their self-concept. So there's like, technology, like there's medical technology and cybernetics and stuff like that to help people be the self that they wish to be. Another thing is that one of the major projects that's going on for humanity is an active effort to rewild, cool, and take stewardship over the ecosystem. I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. Would religion still be Earth-centric? Probably not. I haven't really delved too much into what it would look like in the future because I haven't done a whole lot of work yet, but there is that. The other part I want to talk about is that aliens are alien. The crew of the ship is multi-species, but it isn't just people with prosthetics. The ship has to be built for it. I have like all sorts of random ideas for aliens that I'll talk about at a different time, I guess. Multi-species also means species from Earth. The systems in the ship for life support are based on turning the entire vessel into a living ecosystem, which means that like the ship has like animal life and plant life and like, like microbe networks and like fungi and all that kind of stuff. And I also don't know exactly how FTL is going to work, but there's going to be FTL. And that the ship itself is part of a like, but can kids change their gender expression as kids? They're free to do whatever they want. The idea is that there's no expectation to perform gender as children. That the idea of gender is more of like a thing you do when you're an adult, and that children sort of are just free to just be. But obviously it's a very libertarian society. So if they decide not to follow that norm, no one's going to bat an eyelash. Mushroom-based FTL, that'd be pretty cool. I am trying to think about how, I haven't really delved into how the FTL would work because the way that I want to do it is that I want it to be, maybe not, obviously because we live in the world where FTL is impossible. to have the FTL be plausible, maybe based on physics that we don't know yet, but not be literally impossible. And the idea is also that that something that was key to developing the FTL was in moving away from capitalism, like the profit motive, moving away from like the limits that are imposed by hierarchical structures of society, and by embracing indigenous knowledge about the earth and all that, and phenomenology and stuff like that. And that those things were key to the scientific advancements that were needed to develop FTL. That's sort of like the core, but I don't exactly know what that is yet. But the idea of that the ship and like all the planets that are involved are part of an effort of collective self-defense, so that these ships are focused on, this is sort of what I think Starfleet was going for, but I don't think they did it very well. But the idea is that these fleet of ships are focused on diplomacy and helping others, building social ties and strengthening bonds between different peoples and civilizations. But they are also all trained and know that at any moment they can be mobilized for collective self-defense. And that part of a very deeply ingrained part of human society is being constantly on vigil and guard to defeat tyrants, and spontaneously rally to defeat anybody who would call themselves a dictator or a leader in that sense. FTL, there's definitely Miguel Alcubierre's work. I know about that. It's still very, very speculative technology though. So here's a little bit of like, I think this is what you were more going for, which is my history of the Earth. So basically, here's what happened. The neoliberal world, the one we live in now, ran into an insurmountable problem, which was the collapsing environment. Doesn't seem too far-fetched, does it? States became more authoritarian to either use dealing with the climate as a way to solidify Western capitalist control, or solidify themselves as the only ones with the right to emit. That is taken from it was taken from Climate Leviathan, but I was sparked into writing about that from the Sophie from Mars video. Other states tried to build international governing bodies to handle the crisis. All of these clashed and failed to do what was necessary. Meanwhile, in much of the developing world and in climate disaster stripped governments, Meanwhile, in much of the developing world, climate disaster stripped governments of their ability to manage societies. Many took to what would later be called the human duty. And this is part of my core political philosophy, is this idea called the human duty. And it becomes a core part of my setting's social structure, which is that it's based around that concept of Ubuntu. I am because you are. And that we fundamentally owe our existence to the others around us. And so it is our duty as a species that we are all obligated to take care of each other. That is the main philosophy that should guide all of humanity. The thing is that things like capitalism, governments tried to outsource this obligation and put it into the hands of corporations, companies, institutions, tried to say that tried to do different things to take away from the fact that every single individual person has the obligation to be involved in their community and help their neighbors. And this outsourcing is basically what led to the horrors of human history. So that is like the lesson that was learned. In this period where the climate is collapsing, the people who live in the developing world, or the sort of global south, start to adopt these ideas in order to survive in the most climate ravaged areas of the planet, and their states basically falling apart, unable to govern anymore. While the rich states in the north in the global north became more authoritarian and trying to preserve their power, but eventually they also could not hold out to encroaching disaster, and many developed countries, instead of doing well burned alive. And the unrest caused by just burned alive because of growing infrastructure collapse, sabotage, all sorts of like basically just they were not able to handle themselves. The system that they had built in place tried to become so authoritarian that they just could it eventually just collapsed in on itself. As also from a Sophie from Mars video, basically at a certain point, people realized that like the increasing authoritarianism led to a situation where people realized, hey, if you're going to get 50 years in prison for interrupting an oil CEO's speech and also get 50 years for blowing up an oil pipeline, why not blow up oil pipelines? So that kind of became like part of it. Many of these countries fell into ruin, turning into Mad Max libertarian madness in a much harsher ecosystem. Billionaires eventually resorted to, and billionaires in this situation retreated from society, going into their bunkers. But the thing, and also like the preppers, like, you know, went into their bunkers and hoarded their canned beans and all that kind of stuff. But on a long enough time scale, the billionaires eventually resorted to eating each other, and the lone gun-hoarding nuts ran out of canned beans. So the communities that actually survived this collapse in the global north were those that looked to the model that their friends in the global south had developed and moved in that direction. Though, because of the sort of collapse of like high advanced society, the world went quiet for several decades as we fundamentally reorganized society. One of the things that came out of this era is that a few charismatic leaders and ambitious warlords tried to make new empires or reestablish old empires by conquering others. Though maybe one gets close, they eventually all fail. The world and in this process, the world begins to understand a key fact. We have an urge for authority that for the sake of humanity's soul must be constantly resisted. And this is the key to defeating these like tin pot dictators and such, was essentially a tradition developing of distributed self-defense. All communities, in the name of the human duty, stay trained and know if need be, they must take arms up against dictators. The idea of rulers, as like generations of this passes, the idea of rulers begins to diminish as it's shown to just not work. And a culture builds itself away from heroic ideas of leadership and rulers. What comes out of this is a world of countless small experiments, small communes, but also great powerful federations made up of willing participation of billions of people. The first major test comes when an asteroid threatens to hit the Earth, and this scattered, disorganized planet must rally to its resources to stop it before it arrives. This planetary defense federation succeeds at the last minute. In doing so, they provide the model for bigger and more ambitious projects to be done without needing a single central authority. It's messy, but it works. Hoping this is like, I'm not boring people. This inspires what's called the stewardship. So this like ability to, you know, this ability to handle a big project like stopping an asteroid inspires. They're like, well, we can do more of this. We are actually very capable in the things that we can do. So what starts up is something called the Stewardship Project, which is a massive conglomerate effort to use local knowledge in the Earth's own biological processes, along with new developing technology to not only stop the damage to the planet that's happening, but reverse its harm. It's a combination of rewilding and done with a lot of help and knowledge from indigenous people to those areas. But it also involves things like geoengineering to reduce sunlight and making it tons of energy while at it, and letting the planet cool as it heals. In improving people's standard of living through gifts of high-tech... It's improving people's standards of living through gifts of high-tech infrastructure. So this stewardship project results in like a huge global effort to repair the planet using the biological processes of it, using high technology, indigenous knowledge about the environment, as well as like targeted rewilding and geoengineering projects. So it's like a huge, big thing that is fundamentally shaping the ecology of the planet. Basically realizing the whole idea about calling it environmental stewardship is that humans realize that at this point, there is no like leaving the natural world to the natural world. Humans have basically become the stewards of the earth, and they have to learn how to get good at it. And they do, because as they do all of this, they are regrowing species, reintroducing, like, you know, de-extincting different species. One of the scenes that I kind of want to mention is that a group of people actually go to the Svalbard seed vault and start taking stuff out. So they go to the Svalbard seed vault and they start liberating all of the seeds from the vault and using it to rewild the planet and bring species back that have been extinct for decades. And then also, in order to feed some missing ecosystem niches, we also start making species, like with genetic engineering and like literally like artificial genetics and stuff like that. Like entire new species are made on Earth to try and fill all of the missing ecosystems and stuff like that. It's basically the idea is that, again, humans are responsible for the planet's ecosystem now, and they're learning to actually get good at doing it. There's an interesting milestone that happens when humanity reaches its max population. Like it reaches the population it hit before the crash. People are breathing easier, they're living longer, and they're happier. The planet isn't fully repaired, but it's on the way. This status quo fosters new era of innovations and discoveries, free from the grind of profit or publish or perish. Scientists follow passions into new and beautiful forms of discovery thought impossible before, especially without harsh limits of government budgets or next quarter returns. Many innovations for repairing the ecosystem stir a desire to do a similar process with other worlds. Mars is the first candidate, but the actual first attempt to live on another planet is a floating city on Venus. They begin to work on a slow process of ending the runaway heat effect, because I'm thinking that, like, if humans spend decades developing technology and putting a huge amount of effort into reversing runaway climate change, so it's going to dawn on them eventually that the next logical target to do that to is Venus. And so the idea is that instead of Mars being the first place that we settle, it's going to be Venus. And then also the physics behind what I wrote as a reasonably efficient Alcubierre drive become realized through these discoveries. But I think I'm going to do something a little bit more interesting than that. And in this period, we find, through a new massive telescope, definitive evidence of extraterrestrial life. That's another like big moment in human history, is that as we're doing this, we build a huge like satellite based telescope and like exoplanet searching thing, and we find definitive evidence of life. We try to say hello with the first ship built to be a functioning ecosystem, theoretically able to operate for centuries. I don't know where that goes from there, but that was like sort of the my version of like the prologue to the world that I'm trying to build. And it has a lot of like my thoughts about anarchism and our relationship with the state and all that kind of stuff. It's part of what inspired me to want to make my video about why I'm an anarchist and why I think things could happen. So I don't know if like that's just a bunch of random world building notes. I haven't actually written any of it yet, is the thing. So we'll see. I have to actually, take some time to do things that aren't making videos and podcasts to actually work on it. So what's the threat? Depending upon different things, like I haven't really thought through too much. Like the first story I have is going to be about first contact with a new alien species that is, by a lot of our own, like, sort of assumptions about how species work and how sorts of things work, we either don't acknowledge that they're alive or that they're intelligent, or it's that like we think that they're evil in some capacity. And I kind of want to structure it like a standard Star Trek episode where the ending is about the sort of realizing that this is like an intelligent species and that we need to become friends. I don't think, obviously there's going to be, twists and turns and character drama and all that kind of stuff, but I haven't had time to like really just chew on this story, the like first short story that I want to write for it. But, and that alien species I'm actually very proud about, which is this like idea that, they're a species that, oh man, how do I explain this? It's so weird. Okay. So, there's a species, there's a thing that this is one of the weirder things that exists on this planet that I always have found fascinating. So has anyone ever heard of, I don't remember what its actual name is. Has anyone ever heard of something called CTVT? Or canine transmissible venereal tumor? Anyone heard about this? Has anyone ever heard of this disease? So what CTVT is it is a form of cancer that happens in dogs that is contagious. And what's really kind of terrifying about that, it is, yeah, somebody just pointed out, the oldest living dog, you mean? You got to the point already. Is that this disease, this contagious cancer it's cancer. It's not like a virus, it's not a bacteria. So what it means is that like the cells that make up this disease are dog cells. And in many ways, like, it's a species of dog that like broke rank from like the organized eusocial body organism of cells, right? Because that's basically what cancer is that one of your cells mutates and evolves to break rank from the sort of complex organized system that you're in. And so, like, it's a species of dog that is a tumor. And that always led me to like this, like really curious about this whole thing about how like cancer is basically like people cells. That's what makes it so hard to kill. I know that sounds really weird, but then I'm like, at the end of the day, that means that every like organism that we know of is not really like one thing. It's like we are all complex systems. We're like ant colonies, but way more intense. Where we're made up of tons and tons and tons of little living things that are all very, very highly intertwined with each other to the point of dependence that is that you basically like your cells can't survive outside of your body mostly. And that really interested me because I was like, what if I made a lot of my aliens like really play with the concept of like what even is an organism, what even is intelligence, and make them like really weird? And the first one that I kind of thought of was like, what if the aliens that they meet, the first aliens they meet, they began their like evolutionary course to intelligence as a cancer? Like there was some animal species that caught cancer, and part of that evolutionary chain that like led to this like contagious form of cancer eventually started to develop intelligence. And so this alien species is like a tumor in these aliens. And at some point they got to the point where like they would like parasitically take over the body and like take over the mind, sort of like a like the what are those things called? Those mushrooms that take over the ant brains. But that got more and more sophisticated, and at some point like that just kept developing, and it became part of their reproductive cycle. And they're at this, like, they live in this sort of existence where they are literally like cancerous parasites on this species, but they're the intelligence, and the animal that they are like there is like, you know, kind of like maybe like the, like, you know, an animal level intelligence. And they have this sort of like weird relationship that when humans run into it, they're like, this is horrific. This is animal abuse. This is like this weird parasitic dynamic that like is grotesque. And I don't really know how they would interact, but that's sort of like the thing that I'm trying to think of. Cordyceps is the name of the mushrooms. Yeah, the mushrooms that take over the ant brains. But yeah, I don't really know, because one of the things also is that because of like cultivated animal protein and stuff like that, killing animals on Earth is illegal, or is like it's pretty much a crime everywhere. There's like, indigenous people that like have their own practices, but like by and large, it's considered pretty taboo to kill an animal. But I thought that concept for an alien was like suitably weird. That would make for an interesting first outing. And I kind of want more my aliens to be more like that. So we'll see. I also wanted to have like an alien species that is like purely sensory, like they're like, because of like the way that they work, they are intelligent. Collectively, individually, none of them are intelligent. They're like microbes. But collectively, they are intelligent, very intelligent. But because of the way that they work, they basically have no concept of the past or future. They live exclusively in the present and live entirely in a world of sensation. And I don't know, I thought that would be a really cool like diplomacy challenge. The hardest part of sci-fi is getting aliens to actually feel alien. I agree. That's why I'm hoping that like I'm hoping that instead of like focusing on like how do I make the weirdest aliens I possibly can, I kind of like went forward with like a specific concept, which is that I wanted my aliens to specifically challenge our notions of what is intelligence, what is an organism, what is alive. And that led me to some, if not like plausible, fairly interesting concepts. Make it a TTRPG. That could be fun. What you're describing is kind of like The Swarm by Frank Schatzing. Yeah, actually, the idea that I just talked about, the Sensory Collective, was inspired by that short story, because I was thinking about the idea of, because like the thesis of The Swarm is that intelligence isn't necessarily a beneficial adaptive trait. Because like when they go in the swarm, in the story, they discover that like many of the species that live in the swarm, which they thought were just like animals, are actually like they were intelligent and they evolved out of being intelligent. Everyone's talking like some stuff about Star Trek fan fiction. You don't even want to know. I also have had in my head a very elaborate Star Trek TTRPG campaign set in the Star Trek universe that I have been waiting for to inflict on some group of players at some point in the future. So I know the idea. I know what you're feeling. A lot of the ideas are also taken from other things. Like I have like an idea of aliens that are made of neutrinos and they live in stars and they communicate through high energy particle emissions. But because of like the density and like the things they live in, that they like their entire lives happen in like seconds. So like they don't like their entire civilization evolves extremely fast, but because of like the sort of conditions they live in, they're very small. They like die. They live and die almost instantaneously, and it's almost impossible to communicate with them because, by their perspective, we communicate like it takes us years to say a sentence. So, you have friends that work in publishing. Hit me up. Listen, first I have to actually write the damn thing, and then I actually have to like write. It has to be good. Like this is all just ideas. Ideas are nothing. What makes things good is good stories. And I have not demonstrated that I am like a good fiction writer at all. I've never done it. It's going to be like literally like just a guy's first attempt at writing something. So when I actually make the things, I don't know how it's going to actually turn out. And I feel like it'd be really shitty for me to like, put something out in the world that's just like, baby's first attempt at writing. Because I have an audience that will say nice things about it, even if it's terrible, and I don't want that. So at the very least, the first thing that I want to put out there is I want to I want to write it and I want to have a place where I can give it away for free. Like I was thinking of putting it up on Itch.io or something for a pay what you want. You have the idea that dark matter is basically ghosts, like a whole second world on top of ours that interacts with different forces and why we can't perceive them. That's pretty cool. So much of the world is dead because, like, isn't like dark matter like 99% of all mass in the universe or something crazy like that? But yeah, I do think it would make quite an impression, though, to a few readers to be like, the first alien that they run into in the show or in the story is intelligent cancer. And then to figure out how to be friends with intelligent cancer. That was the thing that like that made me happy. You'd be very scared of intelligent cancer. Yeah. I was kind of tickled by the idea, so this has been a way better stream than I was anticipating. Because I imagine that people are very tired of talking about all the bullshit that's going on right now, so it'll be good to just talk about fun stuff. Tired before the stream even started, yeah. You talk about your creative writing ideas and you kind of act like a sounding board. You can act. I mean, at this point, like that is the gist of it. I had like one really good spree of writing all that stuff that I just read to you, and then I kind of stopped because I got busy. And I'll probably come back to it at some point. I like it a lot. I think that there's like, as part of my like, anti-doomer action, I think that we have a dearth of like Star Trek is like used as like the example of like, oh, how do we get to Star Trek? And I'm like, we could do better than Star Trek in this day and age. And so I was thinking I could make one that feels more grounded in the period that we're actually in. Like Star Trek's future was designed in the Cold War with an idea of like nuclear annihilation being the threat. And I think that having a utopia that comes out of climate disaster, I think feels a lot more on brand. Am I an anarchist? Yes. I have been an anarchist for a very, very long time. I became an anarchist when I was like 20 years old, and I'm like 34 now. So I didn't just hop on the train in like the last few years. I've been an anarchist since I was very young, and I have a very mature philosophy of governance and such that I think I feel very, very good about. And I'm also not the kind of anarchist who is just like a Twitch streamer who repeats liberal American talking points instead of like. So there is that aspect too. There's a lot like. Keep in mind, I am perfectly happy that there are lots of new anarchists on board. It's great. It's great to not be like the only person that I know who is an anarchist, which was my life for a very long time. I spent a decade basically being the only anarchist that I knew who wasn't like an ANCAP. And so it's great. I just also know that there's a lot of people who hopped on the train and then became influencers and then kind of just didn't like actually imbibe deeply of anarchist philosophy and just became liberals. And It's very tiring. That's the way that why anarchism and not communism? I mean, I was a communist before that. I think that in many ways it's just the fact that like, states, man, like the thing that the reason why I embrace an anarchist philosophy and not necessarily like a sort of like regular, like, you know, kind of like Soviet style communist ideal is because, I don't have the same faith in institutions. I think institutions, once they get above a certain size, become essentially self-replicating, self-aggrandizing, like machines that are really kind of devoid of any human logic. And states kind of just keep doing that. States have a habit of getting into mission creep. So like, while like, you know, your typical like, you know, like Stalinist or Maoist would say like, yeah, we use the state to overthrow the capitalism so that we can have like the revolution and get to the communism, and then the state will fade away or wither away or whatever it is they say. And I would argue that like, I have never seen any inclination that these states are willing to wither away in any capacity. They would like every state seems to only want to increase its control and increase its power. So I don't like have the faith that like, you know, if like the revolution, the, you know, Trotskyist forever revolution happens, that the last capitalist is hung with the last rope or whatever, that would result in us starting to dismantle the state government and move towards just like, you know, communism as it was imagined by Marx. But it would just be another authoritarianism in a different fashion and a new hierarchy built out of state power, because that seems to be just like the way that state institutions function. They kind of can't not do that. That's sort of just how organizations work. That's the main reason. It's a push and pull between caring for people and accomplishing large goals, which is the conflation between anarchism and socialist states. Yeah, I guess so. I do think that anarchism can do big things. We would just need to figure it out. The thing about anarchism is that a lot of its ways for how it would manage society would be very complicated and different from the way we have now. And as another part of my like sort of anarchist philosophy is that I'm kind of anti-theory. I'm very much into like phenomenological understanding and like, you know, building a sort of robust anti-fragile governing body, which means that like, instead of like having one grand theory written by a very large bearded or bald, you know, European intellectual, that the better way to handle things is to just kind of do stuff. Like you break down organizations and everybody sort of manages, like, you know, does different experiments in governance. And as long as we have a system in place so that when like, you know, experiments fail, we can like pick up the pieces and those people don't suffer too much, that we could build more of a society that works based on just trying things and tinkering with governance in millions of different ways and learning from the successes and the failures. Mostly because I think that failures, like figuring out what doesn't work, is way easier than figuring out what does work. And you like, instead of having like one philosophy that sort of needs to be like the perfect philosophy and just adds more and more caveats to it to make it the perfect philosophy, instead we would just sort of get smarter by accumulating lots and lots of ideas for what doesn't work, which is sort of like how evolution works, really, if you think about it. And that like on a like long-term basis, figuring out how to accomplish big things without organization would just be would come out of that in some capacity. It also is another thing is that I also don't think that the same governance works in every culture and every environment and in every sort of living situation. So I also think that a system like this that's not based around a singular unifying political theory would work, because then, what works for us in the global north, in Canada, in this town, in this situation would be different than what works in, like, the Sahara Desert or something. How would mega projects be planned and executed under anarchism, and wouldn't it be more or less turned into a system again? I don't think so. I think there are I think that in many ways they would just need to be like projects would need to just be organized around the project. Like the big question, like, how does an anarchist respond to something like COVID? Well, it's like you would have organizations that exist that would be based around dealing with COVID. And like when there isn't a COVID anymore, the organization doesn't exist anymore. Hopefully. I know organizations have that sort of self-perpetuation problem, which is why at any point they need to be at many points they need to be designed so that they don't have like centralized leadership or any like career like members and things like that. But that's another part to figure out. I don't have an answer at the moment, but I feel like we would figure that out by trying it a bunch of times and failing. Do I think something like CyberSyn would be compatible with anarchist organization? Maybe. Those kinds of using networks to build planned economies. I definitely think that has a place. I think that if there is a future like an anarchist plan, like communist economy, might have to work through sort of like a networked thing, so that you can figure out who needs what and what does and everything like that. This is one of the most cynical sounding philosophies ever. I think it's just based around the fact that people, it's my entire anarchist philosophy is built around a few principles, which is one, large organizations have a habit of becoming self-perpetuating mission creeping or institutions. They just become things in themselves. That's like the logic of large organizations. Second is the idea of the human duty, that we have outsourced our innate communal necessity to help each other to states. And when we do that, we abstract other people, and it leads us to dehumanize others and commit atrocities. And that is a thing that we need to undo as soon as possible. We need our politics and our support networks to be person to person, face to face, name to name, and not these overarching institutions that see people as bar graphs or line graphs to point up. The other aspect too is that it is way easier to learn what doesn't work than to learn what does work, and that what does work doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work in all contexts. So building a more robust system of governance that's based on benefiting from chaotic situations and benefiting from failures is a stronger one than having one big centrally architected plan that would then fall apart in a horrible mess. And so very much trying things, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and then sort of learning from that is the key to success in my books. And yeah, I think that, and the other one is that because we are a social species, we seem to have a biological shortcut, a heuristic that is made for creating social cohesion, which allows us to just kind of go along with the group if we feel that it is necessary. The problem is that seems to, on a large enough scale, lead to us being pretty easily makes us fall for authoritarianism. And so any part of a successful society kind of needs to realize that is a fatal flaw in our reasoning that we always have to be on guard for. This is why in my in the space opera setting that I was just telling you about, every community still has training for mutual self-defense, because they basically learned that is the only way to overthrow people who try to become emperors. and that'll always be part of the thing. That is like that's the main thing. Yeah, the term is anti-fragile. That is the term. I'm going over time. Yeah, I should probably go do other things. But yes, this has been a great stream. Thank you for not making me have to talk about the horrible things happening in Palestine. Killing children is bad. There you go. Bombing children is bad. And genocide and ethnic cleansing is bad. I'm surprised that has to be a spicy take today, but that is that's my main thing. And also, I refuse to buy into narratives that associate the actions of brutal rogue states with any specific ethno-religious group, especially ethno-religious groups that have a long history of oppression and have many people who are opposing that of that ethno-religious group that are opposing that very wanton act of hatred and destruction that's happening right now. I also refuse to use the terrible actions of one organization to justify the widespread destruction and human, absolute atrocities committed against people who have nothing to do with it, most of them children. There you go. That's the whole thing. That's my take. I didn't have to use any proper nouns, but that's my whole take right now. And the fact that what I'm saying right now could get me in serious trouble, depending upon who hears it, is pretty fucking terrifying. That's the thing that makes me very nervous. Anyways, everybody, I feel like this is human duty right here. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And I'll see you guys on next Friday, I think. I don't think I have anything else. Try to have a good Friday the 13th.